attending the Exploring and Applying Vaping Education within the Elementary Health and Physical Education Curriculum webinar. We're going to get started. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrea Haefele and I'm a curriculum consultant with OPHEA. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. OPHEA works across Ontario's education system in classrooms, in schools, and in school boards, working directly with educators, principals, school board leaders, public health professionals, and provincial stakeholders to bridge policy and practice, often in partnership as we're doing today. I'm going to get started with the OPHEA land acknowledgement. Our collective work takes place on traditional Indigenous territories all across Ontario. We are grateful to be able to work with locally on these territories. As we move forward in these uncertain times, we acknowledge the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land, including lessons they may have for us on the value of community, resiliency, cooperation, and determination. We invite you to move around throughout the webinar as we connect, learn together. So, the session will focus on vaping education, adopting a harm reduction approach and strategies to address this topic using the health and physical education curriculum, including increasing understanding about the scope and sequence of learning about vaping for grades 4 to 8, including the integration of social emotional learning skills, applying a harm reduction approach within student conversations from grades 4 to 8, exploring resources, including lesson plans and supports available to support vaping education. Today, my colleagues and I will be modeling learning strategies based on lesson plans, and we'll show you how to adopt a harm reduction approach and apply learning strategies through scenarios. First, I'd like to introduce Deniece Bell. Deniece, give a wave. She's a health and physical education teacher with the Peel District School Board. She's pursuing a master's in kinesiology with an emphasis on equity in sport and has been part of a number of initiatives and developments for the advancement of sport for all. She is currently focused on decolonizing fitness and researching ways to support anti-racism in sport. Deniece uses she, her, they or them pronouns and asks others to use these pronouns in reference to her. My second colleague with me here today is Joanne. Joanne, can you give a wave? Okay. Joanne is an instructor in the Faculty of Education at Brock University and a curriculum consultant for OPHEA. As a consultant, she has supported the development of resources and professional learning opportunities for teachers across the province. Joanne is passionate about health and physical education and supporting teachers in their work with children and youth to help all of their students acquire the comprehension, commitment, and capacity to live healthy, active lives across their lifespan. Joanne uses she, her, or hers pronouns and asks others to use these pronouns in reference to her. I will be your moderator for this session. I'm a health and physical education teacher in the York Region District School Board, and as I said, I'm currently seconded as a curriculum consultant at OPHEA. I have been part of many regional and provincial initiatives that support the health and physical education curriculum, healthy schools, and also daily physical activity. I'm a strong advocate for quality H&PE programming for all students of abilities. So, very excited today. My colleagues and I will be modeling learning strategies based on lesson plans. We'll get a chance to apply our harm reduction approach and learning strategies through the scenarios later on in the session within the breakout rooms, okay? So we're gonna get started right away. I'm first we've divided our session into themes, and we're gonna start off with the first theme, okay? The first theme will be talking about the overall expectations connected to the healthy living strand, and specifically the scope and sequence of learning about vaping within grades 4 to 8, including social emotional learning skills. I'm just gonna quickly share my screen right now, and then I will introduce our first speaker, okay? Awesome. Okay, Joanne, the floor is yours. I want to hear from you right now. Introduce the scope and sequence of learning. Tell us all about it. Go for it.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. Hello, everyone, and it's nice to be joining in to learn with you today. We are all educators on our own path of learning, so I'm hoping that we can share some of our entry points to conversations with students about vaping. And so, when we talk about how we can support our students learning about concepts and topics that are relevant to their lives, I always think about the number of entry points that we can use the curriculum to engage our students in conversation. And the first part that I always think about is the overall, one of the overall goals of the curriculum, which is health literacy. And so that essentially our students needing the knowledge and skills to be able to access, understand, evaluate, and communicate information, and then to use that information to make healthy choices, informed decisions across their lifespan. And so when I think about different topics, I think about, regardless of if they're in the actual grade, when I think about my students' overall well-being and development, then how can I enter into those? So at any point in time when I think there's, based on student need and student-centered learning, I can always go back to the overalls, which is ultimately what we want to be able to do at the end of our course or at the end of the grade, is for students to achieve those overall expectations. So really we can enter into conversations about anything, and particularly vaping, when we think about what do my students need to know about vaping in order to take that knowledge and the social emotional learning skills as well, and make decisions and take action based on any situation they're in at that moment in time. And then also too, how can I help my students understand about their choices and their behaviors and how it affects themselves and their health, but also how the world affects them, their decision making, their choices and behaviors. So if vaping comes up, or any other topic that is relevant to my students' lives, if it's not specific in the specific expectations, then I know that this curriculum gives me the latitude to be able to really focus on those overall expectations and the larger, broader outcome of health literacy. So that's a great entry point as a teacher when I'm thinking about, and when you're thinking about engaging your students in any conversation that's going to support their health and long-term well-being. And of course, by focusing on those overalls, I'm really focusing on that intentional lifelong learning, because we know that behaviors change. We know that health issues, there's always emergent health issues in our lives and our students' lives in a changing world. And so when I focus on the overall expectations, whatever those emergent issues are, I know that I'm providing my students with the knowledge and social emotional learning skills to be able to make safer, more informed choices for themselves as they grow. And vaping is one of those concepts. So when we think about the overalls, as you can see on the slide, think about our entry point there. The second entry point are the specific expectations. And I love our curriculum document because of these great charts that are summaries of learning that are part of Appendix D in our curriculum. But we can always go back and see where vaping is actually addressed within the specific expectations. And we can see that there really starts to be a concerted focus in grade 4. And so when we see in grade 4, we see that students are introduced to just what is vaping, and what are some of the effects of that on my body, and what are my decisions around smoking and vaping. And mostly in that sense, it's when I'm around it, or when they may see it, or they may be around someone who is vaping and how that might affect their body. And then we can see in grade 5, it moves a little bit more. We're still talking about behaviors they may be involved in the future, but starting to get them ready for thinking ahead and thinking in advance of those kinds of things. And we can see that in grade 5, our students are now really looking more deeply about the effects on their body, and more particularly developing those key social emotional learning skills around refusal skills, assertiveness skills, and communication skills to communicate their decisions around that. And we can see that D 3.3 talks about uses cannabis, but we know with vaping, there's a number of things that can be vaped. It can be chemicals, it can be tobacco, but it's also cannabis as well. So it's a great way to enter. In grade 6, our students continue to explore it, but in this case, it's cannabis. But again, the big connections between vaping and cannabis there. because vaping is also a delivery method for cannabis. And then you can start to see that idea of strategies for making safer choices and thinking about what influences them around their choices, to engage as well as to abstain. And then you can see as we move on to grade 7, we continue to approach the topic, but this time we're talking about it in terms of other relevant aspects of their lives and how we may be drawn into substance use, such as vaping, based on other issues. And in this case, it might be issues in terms of our identity and our self-confidence, and as well as we look at the implications, not just now, but in the long term, how what we do today affects our body in 5 years, 10 years, and so on, as well as the implications around social implications. And finally, in grade 8, also too in grade 7, very, very important, where there's really a concerted focus on mental health and the connections between mental health and problematic substance use, which I would say is very germane to our situation today. And finally, in grade 8, continuing to take a look at what those warning signs are and being advocates. So that's a very, very quick snapshot of where, as an educator, you can find it both in the specifics, but then if it's an emergent issue for you, how we can tackle that in terms of our curriculum and the overalls. So I encourage you to go and look at Appendix D, as well as really read the teacher prompts and student responses, because there's some great content there to guide you as well. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea. And Andrea, I know that you've addressed this topic at the junior level particularly. So how about if you share some of your approaches, both with the overalls and the specifics, with your learners?
Yeah, I'm going to tie it back to what you said about seeing the whole scope and sequence. I admit it, like as a junior educator, sometimes I get stuck in just focusing on the grades 4, 5, and 6, where the content is very heavy from the what, right? This is where the students in the junior grades are learning about vaping before they're actually getting into it when they go into the intermediate grades and even the secondary grades too, right? I really like how seeing this scope and sequence from the in this chart on this slide right now, it really shows me that what I'm teaching in the junior grades is so valuable right now, because it gives them the background knowledge and the skills and the appropriate decision-making skills that they really need when they get into the older grades, when they're more focusing on the implications, warning signs, and the consequences of vaping, right? So as a junior educator, wow, like even though I may not be teaching the older grades, this will really help guide how I approach the learning in the younger grades. I wanted to pull back a bit in terms of the social emotional learning when addressing substance use topics such as vaping. I'm really going to focus on the learners where that really gives the opportunities for them to practice their critical thinking skills and really giving them the opportunity in the junior grades to describe the effects of vaping, but also identify the coping strategies that they can use when in stressful situations, such as in a scenario with their friend, if they find a vape pen, for example, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna go into the next slide yet because I wanted to talk about a personal experience in terms of how I started the conversation with my junior students. My colleague is going to put a link into the chat box, and it's in reference to the OPHEA H&PE curriculum resources in grade 4. And there's a specific lesson called Substance Use, Making Healthy Decisions. It's lesson number 4. And within that specific lesson, there's a bunch of scenarios in there that really help put the learner in that position of, okay, you're in this situation, what are you going to do? I'm going to admit, when I started teaching health in the junior grades, I wasn't very confident teaching this topic, but I'm going to click to the next slide. What I did was I used the scenarios from that lesson plan, and I adapted it to fit an activity from this OPHEA resource called Ideas for Action. Now, in Ideas for Action, there is a cannabis section where you can find a bunch of cannabis related activities. There's a specific activity called Artistically Speaking, and I use this activity where at the beginning of the lesson that helped the students and myself talk about their feelings about vaping, identifying sources of stress and different ways to communicate through an artistic lens, through painting, drawing, using pictures, images, and words, so that it wasn't such an intimidating topic for myself and the students, but it really allowed them to communicate in a different way to allow me to understand, okay, what do they need to know? What do they want to know? And what do I need to do as an educator to bring these curriculum expectations to life? Not going to take too long, but I really wanted to hear from my colleague Deniece, because she is an intermediate educator, and I wanted to get your take on your experience with the expectations in your grades. Deniece, I'm going to throw the mic to you.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you, and share this time with you to discuss some really important health concepts. So the intermediate grades are a lot of fun, and I realize that some people don't enjoy the intermediate grades for that reason, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. And to comment on what both Joanne and Andrea have mentioned, it's the scope and sequence. And so following on Andrea's footsteps, I have taught K through 8, and it just really makes a difference when you know what the kids have been exposed to. And we always do review when it comes down to making sure that we're covering all of our bases and making sure that the kids feel prepared for the conversations to ensue. But 7 and 8 is really a tough time where kids, they look to each other for information, and we're the old fogies, so to speak. And so Andrea's brought up one of the lessons that cannabis and you making safe choices, because Joanne referred to vaping is a method of transmission for cannabis. And when we're looking at online learning specifically, kids have a lot of free time at home and have questions about what they are seeing. So my goal when I'm working with them is to incorporate technology, though they may be a little bit tired of it, and using Canada websites that have some really fantastic videos. So the delivery video up top it's 30 seconds, and it really just speaks to options of what the kids can do if they're finding themselves in situations. In an instant at the bottom refers to how quickly things can change. And so the graphic images, they promote conversation, because the kids are they've built up this understanding about some of the consequences, and now they're having a presentation. The eye opener one does have an individual in the hospital, so you want to preview them before you use these. You know what your students are capable or familiar with in your setting. Some students are very sheltered while others are not, and we do want to respect what they are learning at home and what our responsibility is as educators. So I start the conversation. By grade 7, the kids are familiar with vaping, they're familiar with cannabis. So now we're working on really who is influencing you, the discussion about how do you figure out who you are and stay true to who you are as an individual with your values, and sometimes religion, sometimes cultural, whatever values those are. So I always refer back to the curriculum, and I say to the kids that I am simply teaching you facts, whether or not I agree with or disagree with vaping, cannabis, smoking, all of the things that we discuss in healthy living. It's my responsibility to make sure that you're equipped to make decisions that suit where you are coming from and who you are growing up with in your environment. And it may contradict with what your parents are saying, but that's where you have the skills to have the conversation. As you mature and grow, you're showing your parents that we can have these discussions. So I use the video to start, and it goes back into the fact that you'll see through grades 4, 5, and 6, the actual word vaping is introduced in the curriculum. And then in grade 7 and 8, we're talking a little bit more about cannabis and using vaping as that tool. Think I'm doing well on time as I keep track. But I also want to say that that gives the kids an opportunity to use the think, pair, share, so that they can have a conversation with their elbow partner feel comfortable, and then they can decide what it is they want to share. And then I group them up into a group of 4 so that it doesn't seem like this one person is coming out with all of the ideas. There's one person that is presenting, which is from a group of individuals. But I definitely try and encourage a little bit of anonymity as well, just for the sake that kids tease each other, and you don't want to have one individual who may have more or less exposure to something along the lines of what is now legal substance, revealing certain details about their families and parents. They may do it on the playground, but my job is to provide a safe environment for them in the classroom.
Thank you. It's really nice to see how you're using the OPHEA resources to personalize it to your learners. Like, as good teaching practice, it's always important that we know what our learners know, where they come from and the community that they're in. And it's nice to see that you're using reputable resources to connect it to what they need to know to bring those curriculum expectations personalized to your learners. I'm going to jump right into our second theme right now, which is the harm reduction approach. And I want to know from you, Jo, share with us, like, how do I do that? Can you go deeper? And how do we apply it?
I sure can. I wanted to say there was a question in the chat. Someone had posted about young children in kindergarten potentially experiencing vaping through the candied flavors. And I think this harm reduction approach may resonate a little bit around that, because our children bring their context and their lives and their authentic experiences to us. And we want to teach them about how to care for their bodies and their appreciation, awareness of their overall health and well-being. So these kinds of conversations are important to have with students when they come into our programs about what does it mean to be healthy and well, and choices. Because one of the conversations we have about vaping, as in substances, is that they're not illegal for an adult, and an adult will make different choices. But there's a very close causal connect between our students' experiences and their home experiences. So we appreciate the question. It's not an easy answer, but if there is a way to enter into conversations with students about what does it mean to care for their bodies, care for themselves, what is decisions for adults and substances for adults that are not for children, it would be simply the same as alcohol or smoking and that kind of thing. So thank you for the question. It's a difficult one to answer, but I'm hoping that gave a little bit of a way into thinking about that and your concern when you hear that in your kindergarten classroom. So sorry for the little bit of the sidebar there, but I think it's important. So when we talk about a harm reduction approach, first of all, what I want to be able to talk about is what it is, but I want to make it very clear that this is an approach that I am familiar with and that I use as an educator to approach this topic like any other healthy living topic, with sensitivity with my students and thinking about their context. It also allows me to create safer and more inclusive spaces for my students because it comes from a place of non-judgment and from compassion. So I'm not an expert in this. I'm just bringing it as a lens that I take in my teaching. And then also there will be links put into the chat, as has been happening, if you want to explore a little bit more about what the harm reduction approach is and what it means and how you might use it. I just wanted to position it that way. So as I speak about the approach and talk about the parts of it that really lend itself well as an educator when engaging students in conversations about vaping and any other health concept, I want to encourage you to think about it in the sense of, what does that look like, feel like, and sound like in your classroom? How does that resonate with your current practice? And are there some things that might be an aha moment, or something that sparks a conversation that you might like to have with colleagues as a result of learning together in this webinar? And also, too, when you have the opportunity to go into the small group peer dialogue, a question is framed around harm reduction. How do you use this? How might you use this? So harm reduction essentially is a philosophy, and it encompasses a number of principles. Now, they're not all here, but here's a couple that really are connected to our work. So it includes adopting that non-judgmental, that compassionate stance, because understanding that there is a variety of reasons why people may choose to use drugs, and those reasons are quite often complex. It also is about accepting the fact that drug use is part of our world rather than ignoring it or simply condemning it. It is also deeply embedded in respect for individual decisions, individual choices, individual perspectives, and all of our rights to make our own choices about our bodies and habits and substances that we engage in. So even if our choices differ from others, we have to be respectful of others' choices. And really importantly is that we respect the right for individuals to access any services that they may need regardless of their choices. So those are key about it. The other part of a harm reduction approach, which we see the language in our curriculum as well, is that a harm reduction approach focuses on identifying and using strategies to reduce the potential harm, both the social harms, as in stigmas, and the physical harms that may occur as a result of using substances. And then when using substances, strategies to make safer choices around that. And so we actually see that language in our curriculum around informed decisions, safer choices, those kinds of things. Abstinence in harm reduction is a potential goal, but it is not the only acceptable outcome. There are other ways that we can think about how to manage substance use in healthy ways when it is a legal substance for you to use. So as educators, given the fact that a lot of the substances are legal at that stage, it's important for us to recognize that as much as we focus on prevention, and we saw that in the grade 4 and 5 and grade 6, there was definitely the prevention language. And then we saw it moving towards that, making safer choices, understanding the impact, understanding the long-term impact of it. Because as much as we try to focus on prevention, we have to acknowledge that our students may still use drugs. And in fact, there is the OSDA census, the Ontario Student Drug Use Census that comes out. And the available data right now indicates that students are engaging in substances. And in fact, with things like vaping, they've doubled over the last number of years. So it is something we want to pay attention to as educators, and specifically, what are we doing in those early years of grade, if it has to be kindergarten, but right through to grade 8, grade 9, to engage our students in dialogue and healthy decisions before they actually may be engaged in it, or how do we provide them with the knowledge and those critical social emotional learning skills they need to make healthy or make informed decisions and safer choices for themselves and take responsibility. So that is so critical around a harm reduction approach with our students. And it's certainly something that I bring to my practice, and we see it in our curriculum in terms of the language. So Andrea, I'm going to turn it over to you once again to talk about this approach and how it resonates with you, and speaking particularly about with your younger students and what they may be experiencing.
Even just when I see this slide again, right away to summarize it, for myself, a harm reduction approach really helps me as an educator to get to know my learners, right? Getting to know them in a very non-judgmental, like you said, in a very safe environment, where it really helps me as an educator to understand, okay, there is drug use out there, and there are many reasons why one may choose to vape or use any other substance. And it might not be the students themselves, but like in the example in the chat box, it could be the adult that the student is living with at that moment, at that age in the stage, right? So they see it. They see it all around them in their home environment. One big thing that I took away from when I started using the harm reduction approach in the delivery of the content in regards to vaping was my language, and the language that I'm using when addressing the topics such as vaping. I wanted to share with you, bringing it back to this resource, Ideas for Action. And again, it is geared towards cannabis activities, but there is one activity in there called Target Your Influences. And I really like, I'm sharing this example here right now is because that this specific activity really helped my students consider the people, the factors, the influences that are around them that influences in their decisions on what to do when faced with not just cannabis, but also vaping too. And I really think that this lesson is personalized to the students themselves, where it helps them think about what their personal influence is. It could be their family, it could be their friends, it could be their neighbors, it could be the media, and it could be their culture, religion, and background. So this specific activity really brought out the values, helped the students identify their personal values and how that may or may not influence them in this topic of vaping. And once again, a great approach to also embedding the social emotional learning skills while also helping me understand where the students are coming from, right, in a very safe way. I'm going to throw the mic to Deniece here because once again, it's always nice to see what the learners are learning about when they get to the intermediate division. Deniece, you can go ahead.
So I thank Joanne and Andrea again. It's, again, scaffolding that we are familiar with as educators. And I think the big takeaway for me in the harm reduction approach with regards to vaping is trust your gut. Trust your gut in the sense that you have the best understanding of your situation in your classroom and your kids, because you are with them sometimes more than their own parents. That doesn't mean that you know more than their parents. It just means, for me, that I am a trusted source for them. So I'm trying to provide this information in a space that allows them to be seen, be heard, be valued, and feel empowered to make decisions that they are confident in and that, again, aligns with their values. So we're helping them develop who they are, but also trying to guide them and understand that these are choices that you don't need to necessarily make to try things right now. But we understand and we realize that you are going to be encountering these situations and these decisions. So you know what vaping is and you know how this works, but what are the consequences? So what happens if I abstain? What happens if I'm at a party with my friend? What does that look like? And for a lot of students in the, and I've used this in elementary grades as well, however, in the middle school, they are more adept at expressing themselves in ways that are personal as they figure out who they are. So one of the lessons that I really like to go back to, I don't think we have that up on the slide, but for grade 7, it's the cannabis use and health effects. And I encourage integrating media literacy or some type of artwork where photo voice, going around and taking photos of what things mean to these students and just allowing them an opportunity of choice. How do you want to present this information to me? At the end of the day, I just need to know that you understand what the consequences are in terms of the effects, both social and emotional. And you can let me know in a rhyme, in a poem, in a song, a video, whatever way you want to creatively share that information with me so that I feel confident in your skills and your ability to make decisions and think critically in the situations that you're involved in. So then we debrief and we share, we talk about all of those things. But really in 7 and 8, I find that I must give the students voice. And so we talk about doing the assessments and doing anchor charts and everything like that together. But ultimately the tasks that I share with them revolve around modifying some of the language to the OPHEA lesson plans, but ultimately the outcomes and the learning goals are lined up with the curriculum, right? And that's what the goal is, to help these students be empowered to make those decisions.
Thank you, Dee. My colleague is going to throw some links into the chat box right now. And these are links from previous webinars that we had that connect to our topic of vaping. I'm going to quickly share my screen right now because I really want to make sure that we have enough time for our breakout rooms. My colleague Joanne will be sharing some resources that we have in regards to the OPHEA writable tools. Joanne, go for it. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Great. One of the conversations that we had early on is about how to engage our students in conversations in a safer and more inclusive space. So there's a number of what are recordable tools. They're called assessment tools, but there are student resources, the red box, that you can use with your students to help them think about their choices, their decisions, their perspectives about any conversation, but particularly with vaping, before they share them with the larger group. It's a great way to have students talking with each other, very much what Andrea and Dee were talking about. So the first one, we're not going to go through all of them, but I encourage you to look at them and go through them all. And the first one that is there is called a gallery walk. And I think you're familiar with it, but this is a writable tool, so you can actually use it in a variety of settings. You can use it completely online in virtual learning as well, where students either put an image, a question, a quote. The teacher can do that. So it all depends on how you want to do that. And then students rotate through and they provide their perspective. What do they see? What do they know? What are they curious about? What do they think about? So it's a great way for that dialogue that is led by students. The next one is something that we use, which is what I know, a KWL chart. And now it's really extended beyond that, but it's a great one, a tool where you can use it at the beginning to find out what your students know, so that assessment before what they want to know about. And so that can lead some of that conversation, particularly about vaping. And then at the end, what have they learned? And students can populate as they go through. And finally, the last one is a think, pair, share, but it's a derivative of that, where you can see that students think, pair, share with a number of their peers and classmates, again, on images or questions. So you can really use this throughout the stages of learning to have students reflect on what you're teaching them and building those knowledge and skills. Okay, so those are only 3 of many, but we encourage you to go into the tools and to use them, because they're also very helpful in terms of creating safer, exclusive spaces around vaping, as well as that harm reduction approach. So, and the link is in the chat box as well, so you know where to find them on OPHEA. Okay, over to you, Andrea, because we're now going to go into our small group portion. So over to you, Andrea.
Awesome. I'm going to go through this quickly. I just wanted to review the norms in terms of what it's going to look like, sound like, and feel like in the breakout rooms. I want to ensure that we create a safe environment for this webinar, and our intention is that the language we are using when we're in the breakout rooms and the questions that we're asking and answering are respectful. My colleague is going to throw a link into the chat box, and what this is it's from the Students Commission, and it just grounds our space in terms of making sure that we have a safe online space and a common understanding for respect and sharing guidelines of respectful discussion. And we really want to make sure that when we show respect, we listen. When we listen, we understand. And when we understand, we communicate. Okay. On the slide, I'm going to share with you right now are the instructions. Joanne, can you share what will happen next?
Absolutely. So you don't have to select your chat room. As soon as we're done from here, you'll just be placed into a room. You're going to show up and a number of your colleagues will be there. You may have to hit the join button in order to actually get there, but you'll just be there. It's a self-facilitated conversation. You may see our names or OPHEA in there. We're not in there to check in or facilitate. It's a peer-to-peer sharing space so far with what we've been talking about. You'll have about 10 minutes. And what's going to happen is already posted in the chat, there are 4 scenarios. Your group can choose any one of the scenarios you want to talk about. So choose a scenario, and then there's a series of discussion prompts that will also be put into the chat, and you can enter into the conversation anywhere you want to. So, what do you want your students to know and learn from this scenario? What social emotional skills would you connect with that and address, and why? How might you use those OPHEA writable tools or recordable tools? Would you see using those with these scenarios with students? And how do you see might really see the harm reduction approach reflected in or used with these? So 4 questions, enter into the conversation anywhere you want with whichever scenario you want to go to. The important part that the folks that I was in the room with were about the fact that kids' curiosity is high, but their confidence in speaking out and asking their questions or telling their stories is very low. And so it was a great peer session sharing because it was about that, and then strategies to have students share their questions, how teachers can honor all questions and respectfully answer questions or help kids seek their answers. And then particularly that they are sort of the safe space for students to be able to have those questions. And there's lots and lots of questions out there around all sorts of topics, including vaping. And I would say when the questions are happening, it means it's an authentic touch point in their lives. And we are those. So that's us. Yeah.
Yeah. And connecting it back, what you were saying, the overall expectations allow us to have these meaningful conversations, right? And be able to ground it on curriculum, because that is what our role is, right? Thank you, Joanne.
Absolutely. Yep. Glad.
I'm going to share my screen with everyone right now. Thumbs up if you see it. Thank you. Okay. This last slide that I wanted to share with you is from our Teaching Tools Cannabis Education Resources. And my colleague is going to share that link into the chat box. This specific resource was developed to provide educators and administrators access to evidence-informed information on substance use. Yes, specifically for cannabis, but I really found that the elementary and secondary discussion guides are great support to start the dialogue on making these meaningful conversations grounded on curriculum. And it also helps students make a safe and healthier choice when approaching topics such as vaping and or cannabis. My colleague is also going to share a bunch of links in regards to the teaching tools, a bunch of lessons that we pulled out from the H&PE curriculum resources, and that's also going to be in the chat box. So what a very, very busy hour that we have. I'm going to jump into our closing now. Thank you so much. I wanted to really make sure that we were able to deliver all the learning goals in this session. Please stay connected by signing up for our e-connection and follow us on social media. We're on all the channels on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Please stay tuned as we will be sharing the recap log and recording from this webinar with you in early June. We wanted to also give you a survey link. We want to please ask you to take a moment to fill out this survey for us. Thank you so much to all of our educators and also my colleagues, Deniece, give a wave, Joanne, for your time, expertise, and energy. And thank you all for the participants. I know it's been a long day for everyone, so we value your attendance and connecting with us virtually on this platform. So awesome work, everyone. Thank you so much, and take some time once again to jump into the survey to share your feedback with us.